Hi everyone, and it's really great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Whilst some of you in the room might know me, for those who perhaps don't, I'd like to give you a very quick background to introduce myself. My name, by which most of you know me, is Tina Arena, but my birth name is actually Filipina Arena, and my family call me Pina. I was born in Melbourne, Australia, to Sicilian immigrant parents. My parents were incredibly hard-working, adapting and contributing to the Australian way of life, and they instilled a very, very strong work ethic in my two sisters and I. Like many children of that era, my sisters and I listened to music constantly. Music has been my life, so I am extremely passionate about it. I'm essentially a pop singer, and I'm incredibly proud of that. I love all types of music, and yes, I know pop music gets a very bad rap from some of you here, perhaps, or maybe not. But it is pop music that has lasted throughout the years, and pop music that has brought me very much to this point. Interestingly, my parents remember me singing before speaking. So it's almost like music was my very first language. I started my public life on an Australian television show in the 1970s called Young Talent Time. And it was 40 years ago, and there were no ethnic faces on television. So the producers at the time suggested, respectfully, that I use the name Tina as it would be more familiar than Filipina. I've never had any negative thoughts about that change at all, because I think it was the right thing to do at the time, and I was totally aware of this. As time has gone on, I have understood that making a living out of music means selling it, and that has to incorporate a degree of marketing. I finally realised that marketing really is not a dirty word. Tina Arena does roll off the tongue a little easier. And so Tiny Tina was born. I was 9 years old, and the television show that I was a part of resonated around the country. As a concept, Young Talent Time worked on many, many levels, and for many reasons. And there was a real innocence at the heart of that show that perhaps would not work today. It was a different era. It was a pre-internet and a pre-social media era. It was before media fragmentations. There were only a handful of TV channels. It was also a time when variety TV was very much in vogue. So from the age of 9 until I was 16, each week I would sing and dance live on national TV. And during the school holidays, I would go on tour. It was an extraordinary apprenticeship where I really honed my craft in an environment that was fun, stimulating, and unbelievably exciting. It was long before there were masses of TV singing competitions, and it was a very different type of show to Idol or X Factor or The Voice. Those shows are fast-paced, they're competitive, and some may say ruthless. Even the terminology they employ during those shows, words such as battle rounds and eliminations and judges, fellow musicians who critiquing the work of the participants. They have weekly eliminations, and at the core are very, very different to what YTT, Young Talent Time, was. Young Talent Time was inclusive, and it was nurturing. Young Talent Time was a family. We were not in competition with one another. To be honest, if I was to be really honest, I'm not sure I would have survived one of those TV singing contests, as I don't think that they allow time for artistic development. And they have become formulaic. When one worked, there was suddenly an onslaught of them. That said, there have been the catalysts for the careers, and some of which are enduring today. People like Kelly Clarkson, to Guy Sebastian, to the beautiful Jess Mauboy. The music world keeps evolving. So my early career was a great learning ground for me, but the premise of the show was far more gentle. It's where I learned to sing. It taught me movement and how to interact and work with cameras and lighting. It taught me to understand the practical side of creating television. It taught me what each member of the crew did and why it was so incredibly important. It taught me that I was part of a team, not the only one in it. Really, the only downside of young talent time came when I was trying to transition into an adult musician. Of course, I wanted to be taken seriously. Who wouldn't? You know, but some people couldn't see past me being a child entertainer. And looking back, it was the record companies, media, and perhaps people older than myself, all the people that I looked up to, that had difficulty in seeing me move past Tiny Tina. But the kids got it. They watched me on Young Talent Time, and some of them looked up to me in the same way that I looked up to my musical idols, because Lord knows I had lots of them. I had one of my biggest hits with I Need Your Body, and that was because of the kids who watched Young Talent Time were now teenagers and young adults. But at the time, I wanted to be respected by my peers and the people who reviewed my music. I worked on that tirelessly, and I'm fortunate to believe that my hard work paid off when I co-wrote a song called Chains. Now, 4 decades later, I'm still in a very fortunate position, still releasing original music in different languages and working very solidly in the entertainment industry. Today, I just really want to share my perspective and my journey and my opinions and observations on what is an exciting but what has also become a very, very complex industry. The most common questions I've been asked over the years are ones that I want to address today after all this time in the entertainment industry. I'd like to be able to think that they're educated and considered points of views. These topics that we will touch on are: how has the music scene changed? Which of these changes do I consider to be positive? Which of these do I consider to be challenging? What advice do I have for emerging musicians? What have been my career highlights? And what have been the lows of my career? And what changes moving forward can strengthen the music industry? So how has the music scene changed? The short answer is that it's completely different. The music scene of the 1970s is completely unrecognisable today. The music format then was vinyl, which of course evolved to cassette, and that format evolved to CD, which was unbelievably exciting, and then the world changed forever with the tangible, tactile product, and the trip to a music store becoming more and more rare, and the rise of MP3 and iTunes. And in this decade, another shift to streaming as one of those consumption methods of choice. Aside from the retail methods fundamentally shifting, the businesses also have changed greatly. For many, many record labels, there essentially are now 3, with merger upon merger happening all over. On the touring and promoter front, there has been a globalisation of this, with the rises of businesses such as Live Nation. As we touched on, all of the physical stores of yesteryear, such as HMV and Brashes, we all know, have since closed. One thing I really notice now when promoting a new release is the media fragmentation. We used to have 5 TV channels. Now, there are more than 150, and further fragmentation with the internet and countless sites. Also, today's landscape for music on television is vastly, vastly different. Sadly, there are very few avenues for commercial music on television today, and the formats that do exist are competitive singing shows. Let's be really honest about this. Music has essentially lost its value to the consumer. They can hear it on the radio for free, listen on Spotify for next to nothing, or simply download it illegally. In turn, the cost of production and marketing has soared. How does this investment translate for an artist? Live music performance opportunities have changed over the years also. Whilst the pub music culture has declined, we have seen the rise of music festivals, which is a wonderful thing. Another positive is the Australian creative community, which in my opinion is stronger than ever. And we'll get to that a little later on. So, which of these changes do I consider to be good? Music accessibility is a great thing. With the rise of streaming services and YouTube, you can listen to music from anywhere in the world instantly. Social media is a powerful thing. We can share information, which is fantastic. And as mentioned earlier, I believe the Australian music scene is stronger than ever. A few years back, I decided to make my first English language pop record in 12 years, after a 12-year hiatus. I'd recorded some songs in Europe, and I believed that my record was ready. But of course, my manager Grant and the wonderful Marie Hamblian from Sony ATV encouraged me to work with a couple of young Australian writers. Very quickly, I amassed a collection of songs, beautiful stories that resonated with the audience. That album went double platinum and was in the top 50 for 6 months. Yes, no one was more surprised than me. More importantly, for me, I was inspired, and I felt the process reinvigorated my passion for the Australian music scene. So it was really easy to call that record Reset. For the first time, my socials became an important marketing tool for the record. While the internet has been challenging for artists insofar as selling their music, for marketing purposes and for reaching a wider audience, especially for an artist deemed too old for most radio network playlists, the internet and social media became the conduit for people to actually hear my work. Which of these changes do I consider to be challenging? Firstly, streaming services and why this is a fucking free business model. Labels and publishers argue that streaming services were set up to counter piracy, which was taking hold. They could place ads around the songs and monetize it. I still don't think there is any clarity on that revenue distribution, but more on that a little later on. Also, piracy. While it's hard to fathom a world free of music piracy, Australia now has a protection of websites blocking injunctions under the Copyright Act. Good thing. Should this have been done sooner? Absolutely. But moving forwards, these are good combative steps. Thirdly, lack of formats on radio. This is a double-edged sword, kids. If we look at the television model of too many formats, it is a road we don't really want to go down. I believe the formats should be based on the music, not on the age of the artist, which essentially is what it is. There are women over 40 making pop music, but you won't hear them on commercial radio, even if they are selling out arenas, like Madonna or Jen Lopez. What advice do I have for emerging musicians? Ask yourself what your intentions are. Is it because I like singing or playing music or songwriting? If the answer is yes, then go for it and don't let anybody ever stop you. If you truly, truly love it, it won't matter if you are successful or not, only that you do it for love And how do we measure success anyway? Is it because you want to be famous? Because if the answer there is yes, then I would say to you all, have a really long and hard think, because it's hard and the odds are absolutely against you. Fame is fleeting and perhaps not what you think it is. I'll tell you a really quick story. Just a couple of weeks ago, one of the country's leading papers published my current home address, where I live with my son and my husband. Along with the full address, they printed photos of the inside of my house and the outside of my house. And they published that I lived there, they published what I paid for the house, and on top of it, they superimposed images of me in my house to make it appear that I posed for those photos and that I fucking endorsed that story. You know what? I didn't pose for those photos or that story, and nor did I endorse that story. That's my privacy. That's the protection of my family, first and foremost. And that's my right as a human being. But my point is the more successful you become, the more liberties the media take. And it's not always fun. So by God, you have to love the music. You've got to love, breathe, and you've got to shit it 24/7. The profile and the fame are really, really tricky at times. At this point in my career, though, I realise that it is a part of the game, a part of the business. And if it wasn't for what some people would call famous, I know I wouldn't be standing here. So it's okay. I like to think I've got a pretty healthy relationship with it. I can absolutely say, with my hand on my heart, in my case, I've never chased fame. It's been a byproduct of my work. It is a part of my job description, I guess. My second piece of advice is find the right balance of collaboration and stay true to yourself. Sometimes it can be incredibly difficult to remain objective with music that you've written or with imagery of yourself. So don't be afraid to collaborate and get the opinions of others. But if your gut says something isn't right, listen to your own instincts, because your inner voice is the greatest tool you will have, and you're probably right. Know your strengths. The truth is, you may be brilliant, you may be a brilliant singer, but that doesn't mean the songs you write are necessarily good. Again, look at what your end goal is and be open to how you get there. Thirdly, make sure you have a really good team of people around you. You need to be smart and creative, the people around you as well. You need good financial advice and really good legal advice. I'd go as far to say a good lawyer may be the best $1,000 you'll ever spend. Bad decisions and contracts will haunt you financially and creatively for the next 20 years if you're not careful. And I know what I'm talking about, because I was a recipient of bad decisions creatively, which cost me enormously financially. So push yourself and diversify where possible. If you're a singer, push yourself to write more. Learn an instrument. Take a movement class, whatever it is. If I can dance, anyone can fucking dance. Trust me. Just watch, it might send you into menopause the later you are. But anyway, do push yourself, because it's really worth it. Look, Beyonce, Madonna, Kylie, Minogue are lazy? Said no one ever, right? They work hard. They work hard. They're talented and they get results. Aside from my voice undoubtedly being one of the reasons I've been fortunate enough to have a 40-year career is because I've pushed myself to learn other languages and to sing in other languages, to do theatre work, to have different music niches from pop shows to symphonic orchestral shows. I've done an enormous amount of television, an enormous amount of songwriting. The more lanes you can swim in, kids, the better. Doesn't mean you have to be the best, but just have a go. I began to write songs very early in my career, and I had to. I absolutely had to. After I left Young Talent Time, I couldn't get arrested. I was singing jingles, and I worked for an insurance company for 3 months. Yes, I did. I did a 9-to-5 job for 3 months because everyone said to me that I would never understand what it's like in the real world. And I said, well, fuck, watch this. I'm going to go out and work in the real world for 3 months. I realised that it wasn't me, but I'm so grateful that I gave it a go, because now I know when people go and do a job that they don't love, I know what they go through. I've lived it. No one took me seriously, so I had to learn the art of songwriting, as I wasn't getting the good songs. I was given a demo once. It's a great story. I was given a demo once that I really, really liked, and I thought, yeah, I could record that. It was called How Will I Know? You know the lyrics. How will I know if he really loves me? I'll say a prayer with... And I went, oh, God, I love that song. Well, obviously I didn't get to release it, right? Because that demo went to the beautiful and late Whitney Houston, and it was a monster song, and her version was a monster hit, and it went where it absolutely belonged. So my lesson was, I need to learn to write myself. So I did, and I've co-written every song of mine since Chains. I've written some songs that have been really well received, and I've written some songs that I'm sure are pretty shitty. But at that point, you can't be too hard on yourself, and as cliche as it sounds, just don't be afraid to try. The reality is people don't owe you anything. And there are a lot of people who are very hungry for it, so you have to be good and willing to always strive for excellence. What have been the highlights of my career? International success and singing in other languages, being the first female to win ARIA Album of the Year, and then performing... which still to this day shocks the shit out of me, being the first female to ever win Album of the Year. And then performing Chains when I was inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame a couple of years back. The Order of Merits, also both in Australia and France, and collaborating with some of the greatest artists, including Stevie Wonder, the late, beautiful Donna Summer, Andrea Bocelli, and my dear friend Zucchero Fornaci. And the opening of the Sydney Olympic Games are just a few of the incredible highlights. What have been the lows of my career? Being dropped from Sony Music was a tough time. I'd had 3 big albums with them, and they didn't believe in my 4th. I was really, really upset at the time. But with the luxury of hindsight, it was probably the right decision, you know. It rattled me. It rattled my confidence. I wasn't able to create, you know, they thought that there wasn't enough new material there, so that had the hit factor in it. So I decided to do a couple of interpretation albums or cover records. I was really proud of them, and they did get incredible recognition here and internationally. Bad experiences with former publishers who wouldn't even hook me up with a songwriting session. Yes, kids, me, 4 decades. My former publishing company never responded to any of my manager's emails, not one, in 3 years. Nor did they ever make a contribution or a suggestion as to the plethora of writers that belonged in that collective stable. Fucking madness. I'll never get my head around it, but it was just, that's what happens. So, my manager found songwriters to work with via LinkedIn. Yes, can you believe that? Via LinkedIn. We did find the right publishing home though, because Marie Hamblian at Sony ATV was hooking me up with collaborations 2 years before she even signed me officially to the publishing company. Which was amazing, because that is called implication, and that's called, man, I believe in this chick and what she does, and I'm going to give it my best shot, even when I know she's not even signed to my publishing company.
She could have put her job on the line. She did. She took a risk, and good on her for it. After a covers album, a common narrative is, you can't come back with original material after that. But let me tell you, I wasn't having any of that, and nor was my manager, and nor was my publisher. I touched on it a little earlier, but I want to reiterate how the creative community in Australia caught me by surprise. They were incredible. They are incredible. I was working with different writers, many of whom were very young women. Penelope Austin, who's a wonderful, wonderful emerging writer and an artist on Universal. Hayley Warner, who had come second on Australian Idol years ago and who's developed into an extraordinary songwriter, not to mention her vocal abilities. And then there's Alex Hope, who we worked together in 2013. And then she was a shy new talent, just starting off. And now, 3 years later, this chick is working with the best of them in the United States, showing many of them how it's done, with cuts on albums, with Troye Sivan. She's working with Max Martin. Here's a kid from Sydney who I looked at and went, she's a star. I'm happy to have just been that much in her path and her journey that has catapulted her into another world. And now she's flying, and so she should be. Alex flew to my home in Paris and worked with me upstairs in my attic with Rob Conley. And we co-produced that Reset album together. By God, we had a great time. I was having renovation works downstairs. There was shit going on in the house. I had a house full of people. I was telling the builder downstairs, can you not drill for 5 minutes while I put this vocal down? He's Russian, I'm Australian, both can't speak. But anyway, we fucking understood one another at the end of the day. And, you know, we're doing that and I'm cooking and Alex is going, this kid must have gone, this woman's nuts. No. We took chances on that album. And that team and I, we took those risks together. That album was one of the highest selling albums of that year. So each low can lead to a high if you're strong and you navigate it properly. Buoyed by the success of Reset, I did another album more quickly. This one started when I spent a few days at the APRA AMCOS Song Hub's writing camp in Sydney. It's such a great initiative to meet new people and to explore sounds that you perhaps may not have done otherwise. We created some wonderful songs there, and it was at the writers' camp that I met John Hume, who produced a lot of the next album, which was called 11, and which not too many people know about, unfortunately. It too was really well received critically and commercially. But Ed Sheeran, bless him, love Ed, Ginger Megs. He kept me out of the number 1 spot. But it's okay, because I'll take the number 2. I'm really proud of that, and I'm very grateful and thankful for that. So what changes moving forward can strengthen the music industry? This is a beauty. Addressing the Australian content quotas on commercial radio in Australia. It's so obvious and so frustrating that this isn't happening. The Commercial Radio Code of Practice in 2013 said, quote, this is a fucking perler, kids. I love this one. One of my favourite quotes of all time. The commercial radio industry is committed to supporting the music of Australian artists and composers. The quotas adopted by the industry depend upon the availability of Australian music to suit station formats. The commercial radio industry will continue to encourage the increased production by the record industry of Australian music relevant to station formats and the preferences of the Australian listening public, end quote. Sadly, it doesn't refer to supporting Australian artists at all, actually, that quote. Radio is still an important media, and it's not unreasonable to expect Australian commercial radio to support local artists. Really. The ABC has typically been a great supporter of local artists. It'd be wonderful to see Triple J and Double J make a public commitment to play 50% of Australian content. Not regulated or mandated, just a genuine voluntary commitment of support. Maybe that would be enough to similarly get streaming services to commit. Streaming services are keen to form relationships with artists and have appointed A&R people. But what we all really want to see is more opportunities for Australian artists to be heard and included in playlists. Quotas for local radio don't match that of TV. And why? To fulfil their licence obligation, free-to-air TV must play 50% local content each day. While sadly, there is very little music on television, and sure that content can be news and current affairs, my point is that the TV industry is doing all it can to support its own and future-proof themselves by ensuring local content is created and diffused to the tune of 50%. Australian commercial radio has a 25% local content requirement, and to make a stupid low number even harder to digest, this content is often buried late at night. It's amazing how much Australian music radio you can hear at 10:30 p.m. on a Sunday night, and 10:30 p.m. going in through the night too, I might add. I'm not here to name or to shame anybody. This is not the point of my exercise, ladies and gentlemen. Let that be known, okay? But one of the main reasons commercial stations play back-to-back Australian music from 10:30 at night is to satisfy the quota. So, I mean, come on, guys. There is room for so much great Australian music. Rather than Katy Perry being played 8 times a day on the same station, God bless Katy as well. She's a frickin' hard worker. Familiarity and frequency make hits, guys. And of course, Katy's songs chart because they're played constantly. Again, with all due respect to Miss Perry. Those chart positions could be shared with local artists, and I'm sure that Katy would agree with us on that, if they were given the same frequency. Music directors are in positions of power, and with that power comes responsibility. Why doesn't radio's local content quotas here match those of other countries? And why don't you just change it for yourselves? Listeners will not turn away. They will become fans of Australian artists you are playing, which in turn will give you more content for your radio stations. So give it a go. France has 50% local content requirements, and the artistic community is alive and it's thriving. I know that. It's not just musicians that benefit from this support. Writers, producers, record label staff, photographers, designers. Music contributes $4 to $6 billion annually to the Australian economy. Can you get your head around that? $4 to $6 billion to the economy. Kids, we're not talking small change or petty cash here. We're talking serious shit. So, other than local quotas, the other thing personally that I struggle with is streaming. Or more importantly, free streaming. TV streaming as Netflix was set up as a paid business model for $10 a month. It's all anyone has ever known, and I don't think anyone complains. The general consensus of Netflix, as far as I can tell, is that it's amazing. So much great, rich, diverse content for $10 a month. It was set up correctly from the beginning, and it's all anyone has ever known. So, I'm not really quite sure why streaming has always been free, as it's hard to train consumers to value something that they've had for free for so long. In turn, streaming services should not punish an artist for holding back on releasing to free streaming service after a period of time after the release of their record. It's happened to me, so I speak from experience. They should be grateful that they're even getting the fucking record. Again, with all due respect, I must mention here that record labels too should take some responsibility. I don't think as a community we are vocal enough when it comes to the complexities of record label deals. I know a lot of artists don't voice their concerns as they're made to feel grateful for having a record deal. Grateful? Really? And of course, no one ever wants to rock the boat. Well, I'm really sorry, but I don't agree with that. I think that's absolute bullshit. It's time to grow up now. The labels need the musicians and content creators. Sorry, let me start again. The labels need the musicians and content creators, or they're basically fucked. They will not exist. So I think they should be held accountable, and their needs need to be more transparent. We need more transparency from labels and publishers around remuneration from YouTube and streaming services alike. We get bank statements each month, don't we? Why don't we get royalty statements each month rather than once or twice a year that are so convoluted that they're impossible to understand? And by the time you get them, by the way, they're out of date. And also, whilst we are on accountability, the government really needs the foreign media companies, you all know who I'm talking about, well, they all need to start paying some tax. Fuck, please. Do they need to be paying some tax or what? Right, okay. Struggling artists pay taxes. So why shouldn't companies that turn over billions of dollars? For me, it's mind-blowing that this is even a talking point in 2017. It boggles me. It totally sends me into a frenzy. This all really does need to be cleaned up, and that's all I'm asking for that. And we can only do that collectively. Another area where I feel there is room for vast improvements are more radio formats and less rigidity, snobbery, categorisation in radio. Oh God, that's too Triple J, or that's too Nova, or she's over 40. We've been playing his music for 10 years, so he's a heritage, or she's a heritage act now. Oh, that's too rock. I mean, fuck, I find all this stuff so exhausting, kids. I mean, I don't know about you, but it exhausts me. What about, oh, that's a great song. Why don't we play it? Hello? Or you know what? That song's not really great, so sorry, we can't play it because it's not for us. Okay, fair enough. The audience doesn't hit 40 and think, that's it, I'm not going to listen to music anymore. I'm done, and I only love what was popular in my youth. Today, people stay younger for longer. They can love the Eurythmics as much as they love Rihanna. I love music. I love Client Liaison, for example, who I did a song with. I'd do an album with them in a heartbeat. And I think probably many of my fans or their fans would probably say, hey, why not? What a great idea. But the industry would probably think that I'm a little bit too old for that I should stay in my lane. Speaking of Client Liaison, as a side note, perhaps it's my point of view, but I also find it sexist that when I recently performed at Splendour in the Grass, it was widely acknowledged as being good, but my age was always mentioned. Paul Kelly played the same festival and no one mentions his fucking age. And another thing too, he's one of the greatest songwriters and one of the greatest poets that this country has ever had the privilege of listening to, and I love him. But the media don't report on his age, or what he's wearing, or how his fucking hair looks. You know, because he doesn't have that much of it anyway. Who cares? But just finishing up on that point, I think that diversity, I was saying, or that I long for, is one of the reasons why Smooth FM has had a very quick ascension to the top. They play music from all eras. You can hear Ellie Goulding alongside Fleetwood Mac. A good song's a great song. That's it. It's not rocket science. So a big thumbs up to Smooth FM. And of course, another area for improvement is gender equality and a better male-female balance in the workplace and in the entertainment industry in general. While at first it may seem like women in the music industry are equal, when you look at the charts, the top 3 artists in Australia as far as #1 singles are Madonna, Kylie, and yes, Delta Goodrem. And writers like Diane Warren were obscenely successful. It must be remembered that the music industry is not just about the artist, it's a business. And that is where it starts to go haywire. Personally, I don't think it needs to be as prescriptive as 50% split of male-female staff. Not talking about that. Because it becomes counterproductive to say that there are 20 staff and exactly 10 must be women. Because I think with such tight parameters, there might be tokenistic hires. But one would expect that in an industry like ours, it would be easy to achieve that kind of split just naturally. Some pretty sobering facts that have been released to show the huge disparity here are this. There was a recent report released called Skipping a Beat, and it had some very, very stark findings. I don't know if any of you have read that report, but I strongly suggest you do. It shines a pretty damning spotlight on the endemic sexism within the industry. A few key findings, kids. Female artists do not get the same level of support or airplay at radio. Fact. Secondly, of the 100 most played songs on commercial radio in 2016, only 31 were by a female artist or act with a female lead. The lack of female representation on our festival lineups became a lightning rod for gender disparity debate in the industry last year. Splendour in the Grass had 74% male-only acts. Fuck. When I read that, I went, sorry? 74. Love you guys. This is not a bashing for you men, huh? I'm not here. I love men. Never had a problem, never will have a problem. The Grooving, the Moo festivals had 79% male-only acts. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of bias when it comes to female artists. Take a look at the music labels and publishing companies and the lack of gender equality in Australia's entertainment industry. It's staggering, staggering. There is not one woman running a major label in this country. Not one. Fuck. This is 2017. I hyperventilate when I read things like that. I go, that can't be possible. This is Australia. The lucky country? Okay, maybe we need to revisit that. There is not one woman on the ARIA board, which represents the Australian music industry at a government and business level and oversees the annual ARIA Awards. Not one. That breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. When I know women like Millie, who works her ass off and who's dedicated her life as a woman to this industry, and to just shouting there, just going, hi, I might be little, but I think I've got something to say. Would you guys mind if I said something? Men also decide who is inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame each year. Oh, I was lucky I wasn't 60 before I got inducted. Only 11 out of 75 inductees are women. Pick any other awards, ARIA, AIR or APRA, and generally female nominees run at about a third of the total list. Of course, this gender inequality is far more endemic than just the music industry. In education, for example, 80% of teachers are female, yet only 30% of the principals are female. So I understand many of the challenges I speak of today are not isolated to the music industry. There are gender inequalities and disruptive business models across all business sectors, from Uber to horse racing. Just ask Gay Waterhouse kids. The good news, and yes, the good news is there is more focus and discussion on this than ever before. And you know what? Discussion leads to change. That's why we're here. So in concluding today, I want to say thank you for your time and for listening. We do have a way to go to get gender equality, to get a better distribution of revenue from streaming services, to get more local content in Australian, onto Australian radio, I beg your pardon, and better funding for the arts from the government. Yes, an equal amount of funding as there is in sport, ladies and gentlemen, of the government. Because once again, with all due respect to our sporting heroes in this country, a country that does create incredible sportsmen and women, do understand that culture is equally, maybe if not more spiritually important than that. So the fact that the government is not playing their role in that, however, collecting a brilliant amount of revenue at it and not reinvesting, is just outrageous. I'm sure some of you will agree with things that I've said today. Some of you may have some opposing views or perspectives, but there's one thing that I think we all agree on, and that is the power of music. So in concluding today, if we can work towards some common goals, for me it would be great if we could achieve these following things. Increase local radio content quotas of at 50%, or at least increase it gradually with an aim of 50% in 3 years' time. I think you can cut that and get to 50% pretty quickly, don't you think? Call on our government to match funding and support in the arts equal to that of sports. It's a responsibility that they have. Get a better balance of gender equality across the entertainment field, full stop. Get the international multinationals paying tax like the rest of us. You guys, they are making the money. Distribute it properly and understand that your platform exists because of artists and content creators. Do not lose, do not forget how and in what order it works, ladies and gentlemen. There are many content creators in this room, and it is all of you that allow these platforms to exist. So don't just let this noisy little wog here in the corner make all the noise on my own, because I can't win that battle on my own. I can't. As strong as what I am, I can't. I'm asking the community, please stand up for yourselves, your dignity, what you love to do, how you see the world moving forwards, the messages that you have to say, the connections that we need to make with one another. It's not just switching on the news and being violated every 5 minutes with someone else blowing themselves up or some dickhead thinking he's, doing whatever he's doing, he or she, whoever it is, whatever is going on. It's no wonder we're all fucking depressed. Seriously.
responsibilise yourselves a little bit. Take that. If you don't want to buy into it, don't watch it. We all understand that news needs to be out there. People want to know. People need to stay connected. Tune, what's going on in the world? What's going on in the world? Do you really need to know that shit? Is it really going to benefit your day? Is it going to make you inspire you? Is it going to inspire you to do something? Or is it going to make you perspire? I'm going to tell you, most of the time it makes me perspire. Getting a fairer distribution of revenue from streaming services. I don't think that they are unreasonable goals. I really don't. To finish on the music, whether it calms you down, whether it gets you motivated to run or exercise, to create romance, in restaurants, be in a party or clubbing all night long. Its intrinsic effects are exceptional. And I really believe we must put a value on that. Together, and only together, let us enter a period of cultural renaissance, like the Italians did when they painted in that era. The beauty that they painted, the stories, the good, the indifferent, the ugly. But they painted. It was a renaissance. They were creating. The world is in a cultural slump. So we must give the world a beacon of hope in these uncertain times. We're long overdue for this cultural renaissance, a renaissance to inspire the human spirit. And you know what? Music is definitely worth fighting for. So let's continue this fight. Thank you so much for listening, everyone.